Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of The Ghost of Yotsuya, a Japanese dramatic horror movie from 1959 that represents one of the most popular ghost stories of all time. This is also a review of The Ghost of Yotsuya, a Japanese dramatic horror movie from 1959 that represents one of the most popular ghost stories of all time. So are you confused yet? Because I was as well. Now, this story was originally a stage play that first appeared in the year 1825, but it has been adapted a lot during the last 200 years in various forms. In fact, there were at least 20 film adaptations and or remakes that predate 1959. So they were churning these out. Now, as I mentioned in my Asian Horror Year in Review playlist, most of those were likely destroyed or lost during World War II. But in any case, there were at least two versions of The Ghost of Yotsuya that were made in 1959 alone. One is a film that was directed by Nobuo Nakagawa, who also directed Jigoku and The Ghost of Kasane Swamp, as well as a handful of other horror films such as The Lady Vampire and stuff like that. Now, from my experience, Nakagawa's version was easier to find back in the day, even if you were forced to use dodgy streaming services or bootleg services or whatever. And this was a version that I covered in my Asian horror playlist. The other film from 1959 was directed by Kenji Misumi, who directed a bunch of the Lone Wolf and Cub movies and a bunch of other stuff as well. I actually had never seen this version until recently when it got a Blu-ray release, and it's time to cover both of these versions in the same video. Now, the following plot synopsis is specifically from the Nakagawa version. Although the stories in both films overlap quite a bit, since they're based on the same source material, but they're also quite different. So, in Nakagawa's version, you basically get this traditional Japanese ghost story about an overly ambitious samurai and the hauntings he experiences. And the film begins with this guy wanting to marry a woman, despite the fact that her father refuses to allow this to happen. So what does he do? Well, he kills the father in secret and covers up the crime. After a while, he becomes sick of his wife and his life of poverty, and becomes interested in another woman. So he hatches another dubious plan to get what he wants. So within the opening 20 minutes, it becomes obvious that our main character, Samurai, is a dishonest jerk. And that's being kind. He's also very emotionally and physically abusive toward his wife. So this guy's a complete scumbag. Most of the first half is spent developing the story and the conflicts, while the second half turns to the horrific supernatural events. The execution is actually quite good at eliciting some emotion from the viewer, and the scares are stylishly executed. There are also some beautiful shots to behold as well. So, the Nakagawa version is just a really solid classic horror flick. In Mizumi's version, the main character is grumpy, but more balanced, and actually comes to the defense of some people. Now, in these cases, he doesn't do it for moral reasons. He doesn't help people because he's a moral person. He does it usually because he's in a bad mood and feels like kicking butt, or there's just a situation where he's compelled to do it. But it's not because he's a nice guy. He does have some principles, though, criticizing the samurai corruption that existed at the time, but he is a little bit dodgy in his interactions. Now, Mizumi's version is actually quite different, and there is more nuance and complexity in how it deals with the supporting characters and how they impact the story. There are, of course, a few very cool horror sequences, one of which occurs in a swampy area. Now, both of these films, as I mentioned previously, are dramatic horror films, so the opening half in both films, a little bit on the slow pace side, setting up the drama, but it is very well made in both versions. Now, as you may have suspected, it would seem that the Mizumi's version of this film is just a better film overall because of the more balanced, handling of the main character. But some of the ghostly interactions with the humans are more nuanced and complex in the Nakagawa version. There's one very neat tactic that's used to bring two humans back together and reconnect, which would have been impossible through human means solely. So it's both versions really have their positive traits, their strengths, some of which overlap. I mean, the direction and the performances are solid in both. So if you're at all interested in horror movies that are set during the samurai era, I think both of these are really must-watches. And they're different enough to be worthy of a double feature. You could watch the Nakagawa version first, and then immediately watch the Misumi version after that, and you're going to get a little bit of a different experience. Personally speaking, I'm not sure which one I prefer. I mean, from the dramatic standpoint, I think the Misumi version is probably better, but from a horror standpoint, the Nakagawa version is probably better because there are more good quality scares during that second half. So, run times are also very lean. Nakagawa's version is 1 hour and 16 minutes long. Mizumi's version is 1 hour and 24 minutes long. So I recommend both of these. The Nakagawa version is available streaming on the Criterion channel under the name Tokaido Yotsuya Kaiden. The Misumi version was recently released in that Blu-ray box set, the Daiei Gothic Blu-ray box set, available from Radiance Films, which I showcased a few weeks ago in a different video. But yeah, this is a little bit of a confusing situation here, because originally I thought the Ghost of Yotsuya film in that Blu-ray box set was the Nakagawa version, but it isn't. It's the Misumi version. So I hope I cleared at least some of that up for you. But if you decide to watch both, let me know which one you prefer, because I do think it's a close race. And as always, folks, I'll see you next time.